I am not an easy man to surprise. Money insulates you from shocks. It buys answers before questions are asked. Yet when Alina stood in the winter glare of our glass-walled kitchen and said, with a tremor that didn't match her practiced smile, "I'm pregnant," the floor seemed to dip under my feet like an elevator with a snapped cable. Her hands were folded across her stomach in a tableau she must have rehearsed, but her eyes were peeled for my reaction, not for tenderness. It was the distance in that look that first chilled me. Not joy, not fear, calculation, the kind of arithmetic I learned in boardrooms, and she must have learned by simply watching me count. I laughed. The sound was wrong, thin and metallic in the high ceilings. "I'm stereo," I said, the old joke misfiring out of pure habit, the way you might reach for the banister in a dark stairwell and grab air. I meant sterile. Not just old man doubt, but doctor-certified fact, after a long-ago surgery that sealed me off from that chapter of life for good. "I'm stereo," I repeated, hearing the absurdity, hearing a man who had once owned a satellite company and now couldn't control his own tongue. Her lips parted, not in surprise, but in something like relief, as if my slip had handed her the script she wanted. Snow hissed against the panes. Somewhere in the house, the furnace coughed to life, a breathy animal coming to heal. I watched the steam curl from my coffee and the reflection of my 74-year-old face tremble in the dark surface. I have been called many things in papers and dinner parties. Shark, wizard, relic. No one has called me father in 40 years, and the woman who once tried to hold that title died with the winter of another decade. I told myself that grief, like wealth, makes its own climate. You learn to breathe thinner air. You learn to pack light. Alina, 29 and luminous, with that lacquered Eastern European poise that made waiters perform better and security guards blink slower, took a step toward me. "You think I'm lying," she said softly. Her accent softened certain letters and sharpened others, turning the words into a careful mosaic. "You think I planned this?" A notification flashed across my phone, a fund manager confirming a meeting, a reminder about the foundation gala, a photograph of a wing being added to a hospital with my surname on it. My life, tiled and tidy. I looked up from those tiles and saw the crack running straight through. I did not think she planned it. I knew she planned everything. She had planned her dress the night she first sat beside me at a lecture on space law, an obscure topic she pretended to love. She had planned her silence through months of my widow's caution, her laugh at my corny jokes, her sudden sincerity whenever I admitted fear of the dark. She had a talent for missing every red flag by an inch. I should have congratulated her. I should have wrapped my arms around her and tried on the future like a borrowed coat. Instead, I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Somewhere between truth and mercy, there was a corridor I could have walked down. Instead, I stood at the threshold and froze. She broke first. "You are cruel," she whispered. "You would laugh at life." "Alina," I said, and stopped. What could I tell her? That my blood is a museum exhibit behind glass? That years ago a pediatrician squeezed my son's tiny foot and said, "He's healthy," and 3 winters later, I carried a coffin so small it felt like a question? That after that, I signed the papers and told the surgeon to cauterize the part of me that believed in second chances? Some histories you fold and refold until they are small enough to hide in a pocket. Mine still crackled when I touched it. Snow thickened. The lake beyond our property vanished into a sheet of white so uniform it erased horizon and shore. I stared into that white, the way a pilot faces cloud. The instrument said one thing, the body said another. Somewhere, a truth waited, sharp as a cliff under the fog. I had a choice, pull up or trust my training. "I'll call Dr. Mendel," I said finally. "We'll confirm." She nodded, but her eyes, those cool, lake-green eyes, didn't flinch. They warmed almost, and that warmth was what made my skin prickle, as if I'd just stepped into sun after a long tunnel. Because warmth, in my experience, is what people offer when the worst is yet to come. By the time you reach my age, you learn how to stage manage even your own catastrophes. I have a staff that can turn a scandal into a soft focus anecdote in 12 hours. I have attorneys who argue like violinists, making a melody out of what should be noise. My house breathes when I lift a finger. Yet on that morning, all that machinery felt useless. It turns out some storms never blow in through the front gates. They bloom in your kitchen, inside a voice you've kissed. I met Alina in a lecture hall designed to intimidate. The university had asked me to endow a chair in an area the world rarely considers glamorous, legal infrastructure for off-world assets. She sat in the second row, notes neat, posture straight, the only person to ask me a question that wasn't about money. She asked me if I believed humanity could be trusted with another frontier. I told her that frontiers don't trust us. They test us. She laughed in a way that felt like a rope thrown across a gap. My friends called me a fool when 4 months later I married her in a ceremony so small it fit into a private chapel and a press release. A fool with a clear conscience is still a fool, they said. I said I was tired of dinners that end with empty chairs. I don't need your pity. I've bought and sold companies that could swallow entire cities without chewing. I can read a balance sheet blind. But the balance sheet of the heart is written in a script that changes hands every minute. I believed Alina needed a father more than a husband. I was wrong and right and then wrong again. The truth is seldom a single thing. It's a kaleidoscope. Tilt it once and you see stars. Tilt it again and the stars form a trap. If you're listening because you're drawn to gossip, you will not be disappointed. There are houses, lawyers, DNA tests, and the kind of dinner conversations that leave teeth marks on napkins. If you're here because you think money inoculates you against humiliation, sit closer. If you're here because you are young and think you'd never be this naive, bless your certainty while it lasts. And if you are here because your heart has betrayed you and you need proof that someone else survived, then please stay. I will tell you how a man like me laughed when he should have cried, and how that laugh became a fuse. Subscribe to my story, if only to remind yourself that the rich are not bulletproof, just better at hiding the scars. Share it with anyone who thinks age guarantees wisdom. I learned more in 3 months of marriage to Alina than in 30 years of mergers. You think my billions bought me safety. They bought me better locks. They did not anticipate the thief already inside the house. When I told her we would see Dr. Mendel, she smiled as if she'd just won a scholarship. Of course, she said. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment softness returned, the actress off stage. We will be parents, Elias. My name in her mouth had always sounded like a promise. That morning it sounded like a key in a lock I did not remember installing. Mendel is the kind of doctor who has seen everything and looks at you like a chapter in a textbook he finished years ago. He had, after my son's death, supervised the procedure that ended my days as a potential father. He had nodded with the weary compassion of a man who knows biology is both generous and cruel. He had sent cards on birthdays. He had sipped my whiskey the night my first wife died and told me to learn how to sit with myself. He's the closest thing I have to a brother, which is to say, he knows where the bodies are buried and keeps fresh flowers over the graves. We scheduled the appointment. Alina squeezed my arm. That grip lingered. It said everything she didn't. It also said, "Be ready." I nodded and lied to myself and promised this would be a footnote. That evening, the foundation gala unspooled like expensive fabric. People in black tie murmured about market headwinds and new medicines. A quartet played in a corner like a rumor. I let myself be photographed with the hospital's new director, with a robotics pioneer, with a child who had survived a cancer I had given money to fight. Alina floated. She always did. The press loved her. They called her a new page in an old book. They called me reborn. They called us improbable and therefore perfect. I watched her laugh with a venture capitalist's wife and thought, she has learned their language faster than I learned hers. You want me to tell you the first sign I missed? It was not the smile that reached her lips before her eyes. It was the phone she kept face down on marble. It was the way she asked about my will, as if she were asking about the weather. It was her tenderness when I coughed. It was the almost imperceptible rigidity in her jaw when my goddaughter, Penelope, kissed my cheek. It was a bouquet delivered on a Sunday night from a florist I didn't recognize, with a card that only said, "You were unforgettable." She said it was from a brand campaign. I laughed and believed her, and walked past a mirror without looking in. Pride is the kind of mirror that only shows you the angle you asked for. When Mendel called to confirm our appointment, he asked me quietly to come an hour early. "Alone," he said, "for some routine baselines." His voice had a new shape to it, a softness that made me straighten in my chair. I agreed, and Alina kissed my temple and said, "Tell him to be quick. I have to get to the studio for the charity spot." I nodded. The lake outside throbbed with morning light. Somewhere buried in that light, there was a current. I felt it lift me, drag me, turn me. I told myself again that we were only confirming arithmetic. But I knew, the way the body knows a storm long before the forecast, that the worst was yet to come. Mendel's office smells like lemon oil and paper, a scent that always makes me think of clean beginnings. The nurse took my vitals with the efficiency of someone who has learned how to be invisible. Mendel came in with a file tucked under his arm, and the look he reserves for friends who have outlived their illusions. "Elias," he said. He did not sit. "We should talk before Alina arrives." My mouth went dry. "Tell me." He set the file on the desk, tapped it once, and then pushed it aside as if to say, "The facts are simple, the meaning is not." "Your procedure was definitive," he said. "We tested twice after, remember? Your counts were 0, as in not low, not negligible, absent. There are rare cases of recanalization, but those are not myths I want to peddle to you." "Now, so when she says she's pregnant," I said, forcing a small smile, "you think I should invest in a star I can't see?" He ignored the joke. "You asked me last night by text whether there was any medical possibility. I'm giving you the medical answer. But Eli, there's another layer here." He used the old nickname. It cut. "Say it." "She called me," he said, 2 weeks ago. She wanted to know whether your history could be, in her words, flexible." I stared at him. The clock on the wall ticked like a bomb they had forgotten to defuse. "She called you. She said it would be the happiest surprise of your life. She asked whether stress could change outcomes. She asked whether there were supplements. I told her biology is not a negotiation." The door opened. Alina smiled, luminous, scarf trailing like a banner, and the room rearranged itself around her. "Doctor," she said, and kissed his cheek with calibrated affection. "We are ready, yes?" Mendel nodded, professional again, the brother receding into the physician. "We'll run a standard blood panel," he said, "and schedule a prenatal ultrasound." He met my eyes briefly. A signal passed. "Careful." In the lab, she hummed. She had a good hum, low and steady like a cat in a sunbeam. I tried to meet her there, in the warm fiction. "How far along?" I asked. 8 weeks, she said. "We found out after the Venice Gala. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Venice. The deal. The photographs of us at dusk, my hand at her back, my smile wide enough to be a lie. 8 weeks would place conception during a week when I was in meetings from dawn until the moon went down. 8 weeks would place her at a dinner I missed because a plane was late. A dinner with a director I had funded and a circle of friends I did not know. I signed the consent form. The pen felt heavy in my hand. On it, all the ordinary lines I used to skim. I consent, I acknowledge, I understand. The words pulled, taut like wires. "After," Alina said brightly, "we should call my mother. She will cry, Elias. She loves you. She says you saved her daughter." I thought of her mother's hands, chapped from a life that money only recently softened. I thought of the first time I visited their apartment in a neighborhood that had not yet decided whether to gentrify or retreat. The kettle hissed, and she poured tea as if the heat might brand her into this new world. "He is a good man," she said to me, not a question, but a verdict. Alina's face had turned to light. Back in the exam room, Mendel drew blood and announced the schedule. We were models of adult cooperation. In the elevator down, Alina leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." I kept my eyes on the descending numbers. They felt like a countdown I hadn't authorized. The first leak came that afternoon. A gossip site, one of the less venomous ones, posted a photo of us leaving the clinic with a headline that treated us like a miracle. The comments were a chorus of delight and disbelief, children of wealth and famine type declarations about love, biology, hope. A few remembered the old surgery. They called me a liar. They called her a saint. The algorithm served me the worst of both and then asked if I wanted more. My attorney Glass called. "We need to talk about the will," he said. "You can't sit on this." "I'm not sitting on anything," I said. "I'm trying to stand upright in a wind machine." He cleared his throat. He had been with me since the first company went public, since the day I learned how to shake the hand of a man who wanted to skin me. "We should draft a provisional clause," he said, "in the event of an heir. The optics of not doing so are bad. The optics of doing so are also bad, but less." "Do it," I said. "For now." That night, Alina cooked. She rarely did, but when she tried, the kitchen blossomed into a battlefield of herbs and steam. She wore a sweater too large for her, sleeves pushed up. A strand of hair loosened over her cheek. It was a portrait of domesticity we had never actually lived, and I let myself sit in it like a borrowed chair. She brought me a spoon to taste. "Tell me if it needs salt," she said. Her voice went small. I closed my eyes against the tenderness of it. It needed trust. I swallowed and said, "Perfect." After dinner, she scrolled through her phone and tilted the screen so I could see the ultrasound appointment on the calendar. For a second, a message flashed. A man's name, a small flame icon. She swiped it away, quick as a magician. I did not ask. I had learned in boardrooms the cost of premature questions. You can pop a bubble by staring too hard. The next morning, Penelope arrived without warning. Pen is 42, sharp enough to cut, the daughter of my oldest friend, and the closest thing I have to a moral accountant. She kissed my forehead, and then stood in the foyer as if smelling smoke. "Tell me everything," she said. I laughed and told her the public version. She listened, eyes narrow, fingers tapping the back of the sofa in a rhythm that has preceded every intervention in my life. "I want to be happy for you," she said softly. "And maybe I will be, but I know two things about men with your history. They don't change biology, and they don't laugh like that for no reason." I told her to keep her suspicions to herself. She hugged me, hard, the way people hug before disasters. As she left, she passed Alina on the stairs. Their smiles met and slid. I heard Pen's voice float back, lilting and sweet. "Congratulations." Alina's reply chimed like crystal. "We are blessed." We were not. We were balanced on a knife, pretending it was a dance floor. 2 days later, Mendel called. "Lab results are back," he said. "Come in." His tone brooked no delay. I went alone. He closed the door, sat, and folded his hands. "Elias," he said, and then he let the silence collect like water before a dam breaks. "Your blood work is normal, but there is a second result you didn't ask for. I did it because I hoped I was wrong." He slid a thin printout across the desk. It was a paternity probability panel prepared from my archived samples and a maternal marker I knew too well. Not conclusive, not yet, but painting a shape in the fog. "You tested without her consent?" I asked, stunned at my own sudden concern for lines. "I tested the only thing I could," he said. "There is no overlap that would make you the source. None." I swallowed. The carpet under my shoes felt like ice. "Then who?" He hesitated. "There are patterns in her data that suggest an origin we can profile once we have a fetal sample. I cannot say more without the test, but I can say this much. It was not an accident." The air went thin. I thought of her scarf in the elevator, the lemon oil, the hum. I thought of the flame icon. I thought of someone else's hands where mine had not been. Rage is a clean emotion if you don't let it sit. Let it sit, and it ferments into something that eats through flaws. "I will not confront her," I said, surprising both of us. Not yet. We will go to the ultrasound, we will smile, we will act, and then I will ask the right question at the right time. Mendel nodded, bleak. Be careful. She is not careless. I stepped back into daylight, with my heartbeat drumming against my ribs like a captive's. In the car, my driver glanced at me in the mirror, and I saw myself as he must see me. A man dressed like a verdict, trying to outrun a rumor. I called Glass. Prepare the contingency, I said, and pull her prenuptial file, every clause, especially the ones about heirs. The sunset clause? He asked. What sunset clause? An addendum, he said carefully, inserted during the final week by her counsel, with your signature. It grants a percentage of your liquid assets in the event of childbirth during the first 5 years. It sunsets after year 5. You signed it. My stomach dropped. The Venice week. The late flight. The stack of documents slid across a linen tablecloth at midnight after a gala. I had initialed where tabs told me to initial. I had trusted a man who had never betrayed me, and a woman who had not yet had time. How much? I asked, and my voice was a whisper. 20%, he said, irrevocable upon established paternity. I closed my eyes. We were not dancing on a knife. We were already bleeding. And still, somewhere in the album of my mind, there was a photograph of her in that sweater, sleeves pushed up, tasting sauce, asking about salt. I clung to it, even as everything else slid, because a part of me needed to believe there was a version of this story where love outweighed the ledger. We went to the ultrasound 3 days later. The technician's voice was kind, the gel cold, the monitor a green moon. A beat flickered. Alina squeezed my hand until my knuckles popped. Our child, she whispered. The words lanced me with a sweetness so sharp I wanted to cry, to forgive, to surrender. Then the technician separated a vial for genetic screening. Routine, she said. I signed the form, and my signature looked like a lie. That night, the first message came to my private email. No greeting, no preamble, a single sentence, and a photograph of the two of them reflected in a hotel window at the edge of the lagoon, mouths too close for friendship. The sentence read, "Ask her about Venice." I did not sleep. The house creaked and settled around us like an old ship in winter seas. At dawn, a plough carved a channel in the snow that looked like an incision. I stood at the kitchen island, with the photograph glowing on the phone, and the lake beyond it fading into grey. The man in the reflection was someone I knew far too well, a director whose projects I had bankrolled, a man with the kind of charisma that can burn you clean if you stand too near. We had introduced them. I had introduced them. I laughed then, the sound raw, and for the second time in a week, it echoed wrong in my own house. When Alina came down in her robe and kissed my cheek, I felt something inside me harden. Not hatred, but clarity. We need to talk, I said. Her eyes flicked to the phone. She saw the photo. She did not flinch. You were late to dinner, she said, as if that were an answer. It was, in a twisted way. It was the first honest sentence she had spoken since the word pregnant entered our kitchen, and it was also the final lock clicking into place before the door opened on the worst that was yet to come. I did not shout. Men like me save their shouting for markets. In my house I let silence do the work. Tell me everything, I said. Start in Venice and end here. Her shoulders dropped by a fraction. The posture of a dancer who knows the choreography has changed mid-performance. She poured coffee and did not drink it. She looked at the photograph again, and then at me as if calculating the distance between the optics and the blood. We had dinner, she said. You know that. He walked me back to the hotel. It rained. I slipped. He caught me. She smiled without humor. It sounds like a movie because it was one. Did you sleep with him? I asked gently, like you ask a friend to hand you a knife by the handle. She set the cup down. The sound was small and final. I did. Once I was angry with you. Angry, I repeated. The word tasted like tin. For being late to dinner. For making me feel like a prop, she said. For building a life that has no room for a woman unless she wears your logo. For treating my body like a closed chapter without telling me how the story ended. You're sterile. You never said it like that. You said you were tired. You said you were old. You said children were a grief you could not risk again. You never said impossible. I let the words hang. They were true and unfair at the same time, a paradox I've seen sink marriages and mergers. So you decided to write your own ending, I said. I decided to write a beginning, she said. I did not plan to love him. I did not plan to love you either, but I did. I do. Both can be true. Not in my house, I said quietly. Tears came, and they were real, which almost undid me. Then my phone rang. Mendel. We have the screening results, he said. You should come in. Both of you? We drove in separate cars. In his office, Mendel wasted no time. He handed us a report that glowed with the authority of numbers. The fetal profile excludes Elias as a contributor, he said. There is a 99-point-something match to a donor consistent with the director's profile. Legally, I cannot name him without his sample, but scientifically, the pattern is indisputable. Alina stared at the page, as if it might rearrange itself under her gaze, letters scrambling into a kinder verdict. It's a child, she whispered. It is ours or not, it is still a child. Mendel nodded. And I will do everything to ensure a healthy pregnancy, but this is a legal and personal matter now. I felt the room tilt, then settle. The clarity did not drift. We are done, I said to Alina. I will not raise another man's child under my name. Her head snapped up. But you will be a child again, she said, bitterness stripping her grammar, running from love because it is not clean. Love is rarely clean, I said, but trust must be. You broke it. She looked at Mendel, then at me. You have the power. You will use it. I have lawyers, I said, and you have a clause. Her lips tightened. The sunset clause, she said. You remembered. I learned it existed yesterday, I replied. We will contest any claim on my estate anchored to paternity. If you want support, you will have it generously, but not as my heir, not as my widow, not as the keeper of my name. She laughed then, a short, sharp sound. You think I did this for money, she said. Maybe I thought money could fill the space where your heart should go. Mendel cleared his throat. Perhaps this is not the room for... It is exactly the room, I said. The man who can tell us what is true is here, and the truth is the only tool I have left that doesn't cut me when I touch it. Alina stood. I will keep this child, she said. He will know his father. He will, I said, and he will know why I could not be. She left in a rush of perfume and silk. Mendel exhaled, long and low. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be, I said. You gave me a map. Outside the sky had the pale, tentative blue of midwinter afternoons. Penelope waited by the curb, hands deep in her coat pockets. Well, she asked. It's his, I said. Not mine. She nodded, unsurprised, and hooked her arm through mine like we were crossing a street in a storm. Then we do what we do, she said. We make a plan. Glass assembled a war room in the library. Clauses sprouted on the long table like a forest. The prenuptial, the sunset addendum, the non-disparagement provisions, the quiet title carve-outs for art and land, the charitable trusts. It was a map of a life designed to be unlootable, and there, like a secret door, the clause that would have routed 20% of my liquid assets through Alina in the event of childbirth. No fraud language, no intent requirement, paternity alone, verified and notarized. We would argue that the intent of the prenup was clear, an heir of my blood. We would demonstrate her knowledge of my sterility and her solicitation of advice. We would present her call log to Mendel, her messages, the Venice timeline. It would be ugly and public, the mess I had always avoided by paying whatever it cost to stay clean. Or, Penelope said, voice cool, we can make a private settlement generous enough to keep this out of court. I stared at the windows. Snow lifted in plumes off the lake like smoke. He will want a fight, I said. Men like him perform their hunger. It's part of their brand. Then let him starve, she said. You don't owe the theatre your humiliation. I thought of the child, a heartbeat like a small drum on a green screen. I imagined a boy with eyes like hers or his, holding a toy rocket and asking why the stars look so close and so far. Money can make you cold if you let it, but grief, once it dissolves its first edges, can teach you to hold what is fragile without crushing it. Draft 2 paths, I told Glass. One public, one private. We will choose when we see their opening move. And we did not have to wait long. The director's attorney delivered a letter that afternoon, couched in civilities and edged in blades. He would accept no settlement that did not include a public acknowledgement of paternity fraud and a donation to his foundation. It was dressed up as virtue. It smelled like vengeance. I chose the fight. Depositions were scheduled, statements prepared. Alina's face, my face, his face began to populate sidebars on the internet like an unwanted family tree. The studio announced a delay in his next project, citing creative recalibration. He posted a black and white photograph of a hillside and a caption about truth. Her Instagram became a battlefield. She turned off comments. I turned off my phone. On the morning of her deposition, she arrived in grey wool, hair smooth as a blade. She looked older by a decade and more beautiful for it, the kind of beauty that announces a war has been fought and not yet decided. Glass questioned her with the patience of a clock. She answered with the delicacy of someone balancing a glass of water in an earthquake. When he asked about Venice, she said yes. When he asked about intent, she said she wanted a child. When he asked about the call to Mendel, she said she was scared of my reaction and wanted to know if hope could live in impossible places. Then Glass asked the question I had not foreseen. Did you know the director had a genetic condition flagged in multiple screenings? She blinked. What condition? Glass slid a paper across the table. It was a report from a studio insurance panel. The condition was not catastrophic. It was chronic. It required management. It required honesty to manage well. I didn't know, she said, and for the first time the armor cracked. She looked at me. I didn't know. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, not even pity, but a rearrangement of furniture in a room I thought I knew. She had been playing a game with the stakes written in money. But a child is not a currency. A child is a country. We adjourned. Outside, cameras bloomed like winter weeds. A reporter shouted a question about legacy. I thought of my son, the tiny coffin, the surgeon's mask, the hand I held until it cooled. I thought of the man I became after that, efficient, charitable, hollowed. In the back seat, Penelope squeezed my hand and said nothing. That night, alone in the library, I wrote a letter I did not expect to send. To the child, to a heartbeat, to a name not yet chosen. I told him about the lake and the way it breathes in winter. I told him that stars do not care about us, but we care about them, and that is the point. I told him he would not bear my name, but he would bear my wish, that he be brave in the face of beauty and strong in the face of truth. I sealed it and put it in the safe. I slept for the first time in weeks, and when I woke, the worst had arrived, dressed in the only clothes it had left. A headline with my name and the word betrayal beneath it. A leaked audio that made me sound like a monster, and a message from Mendel asking me to come immediately. Because the worst was not the lawsuit or the gossip or the photographs. The worst was a doctor saying, in a voice I had heard only twice in my life, "There is a complication." We met in the hospital suite, where the world shrinks to white sheets, and measured beeps. Alina lay pale and furious, the fury not at me but at her own body, which had decided to make even survival a negotiation. The complication was real and dangerous but navigable, Mendel said, if everyone told the truth and followed the map. She would need to rest. She would need to surrender control. She would need help. I will stay, I told her. She closed her eyes and nodded once, grateful and ashamed. The director arrived 2 hours later, hair artfully messy, apology arranged on his face. I wanted to hit him, not because hitting solves anything, but because some rhythms are ancient. Instead, I asked him about the condition. He shrugged, then met my eyes and to his credit answered straight. I should have told her, he said. I was afraid she would leave. Fear makes orphans, I said. He flinched. We set a calendar. We set boundaries. We set aside pride because there was no room for it in a space where breath is monitored. I signed forms authorizing my staff to coordinate care. I authorized an amount of money that would have built another wing to instead build a cocoon. Not to purchase forgiveness, to purchase time. In the quiet hours, I sat by the window and watched the city shiver. A nurse brought tea and did not recognize me, which felt like mercy. Alina slept, then woke, then slept. In one of those wakeful windows, she stared at the ceiling and said, I thought if I gave you a child, I would own a piece of your grief and soften it. You cannot own grief, I said. You can sit beside it. You can be gentle with it. That is all. Tears tracked into her hair. I am sorry, she whispered. The words came from a depth she hadn't shown me before. For the lies, for the way I built love like a case in court. You are not the first, I said. I have argued my share of cases in bed, she almost smiled. When you said you were stereo, she murmured, dazed by pain and medication, I thought you were mocking me. I was mocking myself, I said. It was a nervous joke, an old man's glitch. She turned her head. I did not marry you for money alone, she said. I married you because you looked at the stars like they were a question you still wanted to answer. I took her hand. It was warm and fragile and very real. Then answer this one right, I said. Tell the truth when it hurts. Ask for help when it humiliates you. And remember that loving a child means letting the world change you. The weeks blurred. Court dates shifted. Statements softened. The director and I performed an odd duet, alternating nights at a bedside, learning the choreography of restraint. The public got bored, as the public does, and moved on to a fresher scandal. We negotiated a settlement that recognized biology and responsibility without auctioning the child's future to cliques. The sunset clause died in the light of the report, and the addendum we drafted in its place, one that funded a trust for the child with stipulations that would make most monarchs blanch. The attorneys were disappointed. They had wanted blood. I gave them paperwork. On a grey morning that smelled like rain on concrete, a baby cried, and the world pivoted a degree. I was not in the room. It was not my right. But Mendel texted me a single word: safe. I stood in my kitchen and let the word move through me like a warm wind. The lake beyond the glass rippled in a way that had nothing to do with weather. They named him Luca. He had a mouth built for stubbornness and hands that opened and closed as if conducting music only he could hear. I met him a week later in a quiet hour choreographed by lawyers and nurses. Alina watched me hold him. Her face was a map of everything we had been and would never be. The director stood back, awkward, terrified, proud. Hello, Luca, I said. You don't know me. That is a gift I mean to honor. But I know something about the sky. If you ever want to learn, I have a telescope that's older than your father and kinder than both of us. He blinked at the light. I blinked back tears I had not planned to spend. Then I placed the letter on the bedside table, the one I had written in the dark before the worst arrived. For when he asks about the lake, I said. Alina touched the envelope. Thank you. I nodded to the director. He nodded back. Men can make peace without liking each other. They can choose a world where a child doesn't pay for their pride. In the months that followed, I did something I am not famous for. I sat still. I learned the names of the nurses and the barista at the hospital cafe, and the janitor who hummed old soul songs on the night shift. I watched a woman I had loved become a mother who fought like a soldier and forgave like a priest. I learned to be a visitor and not a savior, a donor and not a dictator, a man who understood that love, like money, must be reallocated when the market changes. You came for scandal. You stayed for the surgery I performed on myself without anesthesia. The removal of a story I had told for decades about control. The lesson for those who like clean lists is this: wealth protects you from many things, not from yourself. Truth will cut you and then stitch you up. Love will ask you to lose, so someone smaller can win. And if you are lucky, you will laugh at the wrong time, say the wrong word, and discover the humility that follows is the only fortune worth guarding. If this story found you in a season of betrayal, take from me what I took from the ice on the lake. Even when the surface looks solid, currents move under it, shaping what comes next. Stand carefully, listen, and when it cracks, don't pretend you didn't hear. Step back. Choose the shore that saves the child. Subscribe if you want more than spectacle. Share this if someone you love thinks money is a vaccine against sorrow. I will keep telling the truth I can bear and the truth I can't, because both have taught me how to walk across winter without sinking. And remember the line I wish I had said right the first time. Not I'm stereo, I'm human, which is to say, capable of error, capable of repair, and responsible for the lives that brush against mine. The worst arrived, the worst passed, and what remains is a boy with a name like Light, a woman who became more honest than her fears, a man who finally learned that legacies are not made of steel and glass, but of letters left on bedside tables and hands steady enough to hold what is breakable. The rest is noise. The rest is the wind against the windows, reminding me that weather changes, and so, if we are brave, do we. But the end of this is not an end at all. It's a beginning you're invited to witness if you choose to keep listening.